Elena Braxton didn't look like what people expected. Not for someone with a legacy, not for someone who owned 17 hotels and sat on 3 national boards. She was black, female, dressed in simplicity soft loafers, tailored slacks, a dusty blue blouse. No designer purse, no entourage, no signal flare announcing importance, just a quiet presence. And that was the problem. When she stepped through the revolving doors of the Braxton Marquette, the first hotel she'd ever built, she didn't get a welcome. She got a second glance, then a silent judgment. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist looked up. Polite smile, measured tone. "Checking in?" she asked, already scanning for an excuse. Elena returned the smile, as she'd done 1,000 times before. "Yes, Elena Braxton." The typing stopped. The shift happened fast, the micro-hesitation, the clipped words. "I don't see a reservation under that name, and we're at full capacity tonight. Guests only." There it was. Not loud, not cruel, just firm and rooted in assumption. Elena didn't bristle, didn't flash credentials. She simply glanced past the desk, toward the gold-lettered plaque that hung on the back wall. The Braxton Marquette, a Braxton property. "I am a guest," she said, voice even. "And more than that, I own this building." The girl blinked, then came the smirk. "You own the hotel?" It wasn't curiosity, it was disbelief. The kind that says you don't look like someone who builds anything. Elena nodded. "Yes. I'll have to call the manager." "Go ahead," she said. And just like that, the air shifted. Not because of who she was, but because they hadn't expected someone like her to be anything more than background. What came next wasn't rage, it was precision, patience, and a quiet lesson in what real power looks like when it's been underestimated one too many times. Elena stepped back from the counter, her phone resting loosely in her hand, the receptionist already glancing away as if dismissing a problem she didn't want to own. Behind her, the lobby swirled with quiet noise suitcases rolling across tile, soft jazz humming through the speakers, the low click of a man's loafers near the elevators. But around Elena, there was stillness, thick, weighted stillness. She didn't pace, didn't sigh, didn't start explaining herself to prove a point. She simply leaned against the cool edge of a marble pillar, dialed one number, and spoke 7 words. "I've been denied access to my own property." The call lasted 26 seconds. No raised voice, no long story. She didn't need one. She had earned her authority long before this lobby forgot it. Security had started to shift by then, 2 men in navy jackets flanking either side of the lobby, not aggressive, not armed, but present. One stood near the coffee bar, the other near the elevators, both stealing occasional glances her way. It wasn't fear they carried, it was doubt. The same kind she'd faced years ago, in a different lobby, different city. Milwaukee. She'd just made VP. Wore heels that cut into her skin and a blazer that didn't quite fit. Security followed her then too. Back then, the only thing that saved her from being escorted out was the CFO walking down and saying her name loud enough for everyone to hear. She hadn't forgotten that day. And now, nearly 2 decades, 2 empires, and 17 properties later, it was happening again. Not because she lacked credentials, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because the girl behind the desk had decided that someone who looked like her didn't fit the picture in her head. That was the part that stung. Not the refusal, but how unsurprising it was. She could have pulled out her ID, she could have recited ownership documents from memory. But that wasn't what this moment was for. This wasn't about getting a room. It was about something much older and far more dangerous. The casual way people erase you when they think you don't matter. And so Elena waited not for an apology, but for the truth to catch up. Because sooner or later, it always does. The manager didn't come right away. First, it was a whisper near the back hallway. Then a flicker of motion, the receptionist murmuring into the phone, her eyes darting toward Elena as if suddenly unsure. Seconds later, a thin man in a wrinkled blazer appeared from the staff corridor, clutching a tablet like a shield. His name tag read, Assistant Manager, Jordan Fleet. He approached with that forced smile reserved for moments when people realize they may have made a very public mistake. "Good evening," he began, voice too chipper. "Is there an issue with your reservation?" "She claims to own the hotel," the receptionist cut in, louder than necessary. Her voice was tight, a mix of defensiveness and disbelief, the kind that begged someone to back her up. Jordan's smile faltered. He looked at Elena, and his posture shifted. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was doing all the talking. "I don't claim," she said finally, her tone precise. "I do. My name is Elena Braxton. You'll find it on every investor report, every executive memo. This hotel wouldn't exist without me." Jordan blinked. "Right. Of course. Just give me a moment to check something in the back." He pivoted and disappeared through the same hallway he came from, muttering hurriedly into his headset. Across the lobby, attention had begun to shift. A man in a blazer glanced up from his newspaper. A couple near the lounge stopped mid-sip. The security guards, once stationed casually, now stood a bit more rigid. No one said anything, but the tension was starting to hum. Elena didn't move. She wasn't here for theater. She'd learned long ago that stillness unnerved people more than noise. The receptionist Mariah, her name tag now visible, kept tapping her nails on the counter, a nervous rhythm building where arrogance had lived just minutes ago. She peeked down at her phone beneath the desk, probably Googling the name she dismissed earlier. It would hit her soon. The weight of who she'd just turned away. The scale of the room she thought she controlled. And when it did, Elena would still be standing there, not to gloat, not to shame, but to remind them, you don't have to yell to be right. You just have to let the truth arrive on its own. And it was almost here. The suite was ready within minutes or so, they claimed. Jordan returned with a flushed face and 2 keycards in shaking hands. Behind him, 2 men in sharp suits had emerged from the elevator with the kind of urgency that only comes from corporate panic. Elena recognized them instantly. Thomas Reno, the district director, and Brent Kessler, regional VP. Neither had called ahead. That meant someone above them had. "Ms. Braxton," Brent said, his voice taut with apology, "we are so sorry for the confusion. Your suite is prepared. We've cleared 14B for you. Your car will be rerouted in the morning. Everything you need will be taken care of." Elena offered a polite nod. No smile. Jordan opened his mouth, perhaps to explain or salvage what little ground he had left, but Brent cut him off with a single glance. A quiet understanding passed between them all. This wasn't just a service error. It was a brand failure. As Elena stepped into the elevator, the lobby behind her swirled in awkward silence. No one stopped her. No one dared. The suite smelled exactly as she'd designed it years ago, lemon and eucalyptus. Clean, calming, intentional. She had chosen that scent for a reason, something that said luxury without yelling it. But tonight, it didn't feel like welcome. It felt like irony. Her duffel was set on the bench. The espresso pods were neatly aligned. A fruit tray waited on the marble table, just as requested in her usual preferences. Someone had moved fast. Too fast. She walked through the space slowly, not checking for amenities, but for sincerity. Was the bed turned down because they cared, or because they feared what would happen if it wasn't? She sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence settle around her. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "Everything's in motion. Media's ready. Just say the word." Elena stared at the screen. One press, and this story would catch fire. But she didn't press. Not tonight. This wasn't about headlines. It was about the weight of being constantly mistaken, constantly questioned even in rooms you designed, buildings you paid for, legacies you bled to build. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and breathed in the scent she once chose to make others feel at ease. Now, she just needed it to calm herself. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Elena Braxton stepped into the elevator like a woman who had nothing left to prove and everything still worth defending. She wore a charcoal gray suit tailored sharp at the shoulders, a clean ivory blouse tucked beneath, and soft leather heels that echoed with intention across the hallway carpet. Her curls were pulled back in a smooth twist, exposing a face both calm and carved by sleepless conviction. As the elevator descended, she didn't rehearse. She didn't need to. The truth wasn't something she had to memorize. When the doors opened into the lobby, the energy shifted like a tide. Conversations paused. Phones were lowered mid-scroll. Even the barista behind the coffee kiosk stopped mid-pour. This time, no one questioned who she was. Brent and Thomas were already waiting near the fireplace, holding black folders and 2 cups of coffee untouched. They looked like men who hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. A woman from HR, her name tag reading Marta Green, Corporate Affairs, stood stiff beside them, notepad ready. They didn't speak until Elena moved. And when she did, they followed past the concierge, through a frosted glass door, and into the executive conference room. Waiting inside were Jordan Fleet and Mariah Torres. The assistant manager sat too upright, his clipboard trembling slightly against the table. Mariah looked down at her lap, hands folded, a small scab on one knuckle from biting her own nails. Elena didn't sit. She remained standing at the head of the table, arms crossed lightly, gaze steady, but not sharp. Would someone like to explain what happened last night from your perspective? No accusation, no venom, just space and weight. Jordan opened his mouth, then closed it. Mariah barely breathed. I just didn't think she was... Mariah started, her voice already unraveling. Elena tilted her head slightly. Didn't think I was what? Mariah swallowed. The owner. You didn't look... Elena let the pause linger. Did I raise my voice? No, ma'am. Was I rude? No. Did I threaten anyone? No. She nodded slowly, then finally sat. Good. Then let's talk about what needs to change. And just like that, the reckoning began not with a hammer, but with clarity, not to punish, but to reset the room she built in the way it was always meant to operate. The air in the conference room hung thick, not with fear, but with consequence. Elena didn't need to yell. She didn't need to list titles or wave policy. Everyone in the room already knew. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a turning point. Across from her, Marta from HR cleared her throat. We've prepared immediate measures, she began. Mariah will be removed from front desk duties until she completes recertification. Jordan will be placed on administrative review pending further interviews. Elena nodded once, not in approval, but in acknowledgement. And the rest? She asked, her voice calm as glass. Brent spoke up. We're issuing a property-wide memo today. Mandatory inclusivity training, updated hiring protocols. Every staff member, no exceptions. Carlos, the director of operations, added quickly, we're updating interview processes as well, new screening for bias patterns, scenario-based evaluations. Elena raised a hand, gently cutting him off. Slow down, she said. This isn't a checklist. They froze. I don't want a box-ticking exercise. I don't want people memorizing scripts about diversity and respect just to keep their jobs. She looked each of them in the eye. I want understanding. I want recognition. I want every person who wears this brand to know what respect looks like when no one's watching. Marta scribbled quickly in her notebook. Jordan stared at the table. Mariah bit her lips so hard it went white. Elena leaned forward slightly. You know what the hardest part of last night was? Not the mistake. Not even the disrespect, it was the predictability of it, that after everything I've built, someone still looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. Her voice didn't rise, but the room shrank around it. Brent exhaled. We'll make it real, from top to bottom. Elena nodded again. Start by rewriting the training materials. No more fake testimonials. No corporate scripts. I want real stories. I want staff to hear the truth even when it's uncomfortable. She stood, gathering her folder. Culture isn't built by what you say when the CEO is in the room. It's built by what you do when you think she never will be. And with that, she walked out, leaving behind silence, not of defeat, but of a system beginning to understand what it would take to evolve. Elena waited until the lobby calmed, until the morning rush thinned and the noise softened into background static. She wasn't looking for drama. She was looking for truth, and truth rarely shows up on time. You have to give it space to arrive. She found Mariah in the staff lounge, seated at a narrow table near the vending machine, a half-eaten blueberry muffin pushed to the side. Her phone sat face down, untouched. Her posture was smaller than the night before, folded into herself like someone waiting for punishment. Elena didn't send for her. She walked in alone. Mariah looked up, startled. She almost knocked over her drink trying to stand. Relax, Elena said, gently pulling out the chair across from her. I just want to talk. Mariah sat slowly. She didn't speak. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was honest, the kind of quiet that can only exist between two people who have both been on the wrong side of something real. Elena folded her hands on the table. Have you ever worked somewhere you felt invisible? Mariah blinked, then nodded. Yeah, most of the time, actually. Tell me. Mariah hesitated, then shrugged. I worked nights at a diner off I-90, wore a paper hat, got called sweetheart and kid even though I was almost 30. Tips were bad unless I smiled like I meant it. Nobody asked my name. They just talked through me. Elena nodded slowly. So you know what it feels like to be overlooked. Mariah's voice was quiet. Yes. Elena leaned forward, not unkindly. Then help me understand how you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong. The question didn't land like a weapon. It landed like a mirror, and Mariah saw herself in it clearly. I didn't mean to, she whispered. You didn't look like the kind of person who owns a hotel? Mariah nodded, eyes cast downward. That's the real issue, Elena said softly. Not that you were rude, but that your instinct, your first assumption, erased everything I am. She stood, not to leave, but to make space for the final words. I wasn't here to fire you. I was here to be seen, as a whole person, not just a correction. And for the first time, Mariah didn't look away. Back in the management office, Elena stood by the window, overlooking the valet loop where guests wheeled bags and bellhops rotated SUVs with polished ease. On the surface, the hotel had returned to its rhythm, polished, seamless, and composed. But inside these walls, something had cracked, and she wasn't going to let anyone seal it back up without inspection. On the desk before her sat a stack of personnel files. Marta from HR stood nearby, flipping through onboarding documents, making sharp notes in the margins. Carlos, the director of operations, was reviewing the internal memo line by line. Brent hovered near the coffee cart, his suit rumpled from a night of poor sleep and worse realization. Elena picked up the top folder and opened it without ceremony. I'm not here to punish, she said, her voice steady. I'm here to prevent repetition. Carlos looked up. We've revised the interview templates. We're adding empathy screening, behavioral pattern tests, not just can you do the job, but how do you see people when no one's watching? Good, Elena replied, scanning a training outline. Add me to the mystery guest rotation. Brent frowned slightly. You want to go undercover? Not undercover, she corrected. Just anonymous, until I'm not. They exchanged a glance, part respect, part dread. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. I want to walk into my hotels without fanfare, she continued, and feel the culture working without me having to trigger it. Marta chimed in. We're also building new modules story-based, first-person guest narratives. We're moving away from the corporate handbook voice. Elena nodded. Make sure they're real, not scripted, not sanitized. I want discomfort. I want truth. She paused, eyes drifting back to the valet loop. I've built 17 properties across this country. Baltimore, Denver, Phoenix. Each one designed with the same principle. Luxury made human. Welcoming without judgment. Excellence without exclusion. But somewhere along the way, we started performing culture instead of living it. She tapped the file gently on the desk. I didn't build this brand to impress investors. I built it so people like me and people like Mariah could walk into a lobby and not be questioned. The room was quiet, not with fear, but with focus. Because they all knew. This wasn't about fixing one hotel. It was about remembering what made them different in the first place. The suite was quiet when Elena returned. Housekeeping had already come and gone, the bed smoothed, towels reset, espresso cups replaced. The lemon and eucalyptus scent still lingered in the air, gentler now, less clinical, more familiar. Her duffel was zipped and placed neatly by the door, laptop tucked beside it with the charger wrapped tightly. Everything was in order, except for one thing. A folded note sat on the nightstand. No envelope, just lined hotel stationery, the kind found in every drawer. The handwriting was neat, careful. Elena opened it slowly, expecting some form letter, a pre-approved script from PR. But what she read made her pause. Ms. Braxton. Thank you for your grace. I'll be better. M. No title, no excuses, just ink and intention. She stood there for a long moment, the note soft between her fingers. It wasn't elaborate, it wasn't grand, but it was honest, and that made it heavier than any apology delivered in a meeting. It was the kind of message that couldn't be coached or reviewed by HR. It came from recognition, and for Elena, that meant something. She folded it once and slipped it into the side pocket of her purse, not as a keepsake, as proof that this moment hadn't been for nothing, that the confrontation, the stillness, the choosing not to lash out had created space for someone else to reflect. She took one last look around the suite. The light coming in through the sheer curtains painted the walls in soft gold. Outside, the city moved as always, cabs changing lanes, hotel doors swinging open, lives continuing on schedule. But something inside the building had shifted. Maybe not everything, not yet, but enough. As she stepped into the hallway, heels cushioned against the thick carpet, Elena didn't feel burdened. She didn't feel victorious either, What she felt was rare acknowledged, and that was more than she had come in with. Downstairs, the same doorman from the night before opened the car door without hesitation. "Safe travels, Ms. Braxton," he said with warmth. "We hope to see you again soon." She smiled for the first time in hours. "You will." And this time it wasn't a promise, it was a reminder. The car ride to the airport was silent, not with tension, but with clarity. No radio, no chatter from the driver, just the hum of rubber on pavement and the occasional click of a turn signal as the city unspooled behind her. Elena sat in the back seat, her phone resting on her lap, the folded note from Mariah still tucked in the side pocket of her purse, like a small, private truth. She hadn't reread it. She didn't need to. It had already done its work. Outside the window, Chicago moved like it always did, fast, indifferent, alive. Corner diners blinked with neon signs. Newsstands yawned open. People rushed to places that mattered to them. And yet, in that quiet morning blur, Elena found herself thinking not about where she was going, but how far she had come. She remembered herself at 27, working night audit in a stiff blazer, being called sweetheart by men who never learned her name, walking into boardrooms and being mistaken for the assistant, being told she was too polished for frontline work and not assertive enough for leadership, as if there was no place she belonged. And still, she built something, not for vengeance, not for applause, but because she believed in the power of creating space where others didn't have to shrink to fit in. And yet, even with 17 hotels, corporate teams, and quarterly reports that bore her signature, she still had to remind people, she was not the exception. She was the reality they refused to see. But not anymore. As the airport terminal came into view, Elena didn't feel the sting of last night. What she carried now wasn't bitterness, it was memory. And memory, when used right, becomes blueprint. She stepped out of the car, heels hitting concrete with quiet confidence. She didn't look back at the hotel. She didn't need to, because she hadn't left empty-handed. She'd left behind assumptions, and taken with her something more enduring truth. And for anyone who'd ever been overlooked, questioned, or made to prove they belonged, she had one thing left to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like the door was always yours. In a world that often judges by appearances and assumes power wears a certain face, Elena Braxton's story reminds us of something essential. Dignity is not something given, it is something we carry. She didn't raise her voice or demand respect through titles. She stood firm in who she was, allowing the truth of her presence to do the work. That's a lesson worth remembering at any age, especially for those of us who've lived long enough to know that quiet strength often speaks louder than any speech. Her story is about more than business or bias. It's about walking into rooms, even ones that forget you, and choosing not to forget yourself. For anyone who's ever been overlooked or made to feel small, this is a gentle call. You don't need to explain your worth. Live it. Let your presence be your proof. And let the world adjust to your light, not the other way around. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.